Hello and welcome to the Business of Authority. I'm Jonathan Stark.
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
And today we are going to kick off 2024.
Yay! I love years that have even numbers for some reason. 2024 just sounds like it's going to be a good one.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. So this has become an annual tradition for us where we have a sort of kick off the year episode where we talk about, things like setting objectives and strategies and what tactics we might try or you might try, and what the focus for the year is going to be. And people seem to like it. It's like a good time of year to reset and think big thoughts like that.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, maybe we should start with like what's happening in the world right now. Because I guess we could say this every year, but it does feel like there's a lot in the swirl. We've got two really large wars with no end in sight, it's impacting a lot of people. We've got what I would call is excessive softness in the tech startup space. I was just reading a recent article about how many gazillions of dollars have been blown up and now millions being returned to investors and startups, kind of quietly closing. We've got this, uncertain interest rate and inflation environment. So we have kind of all that. But then we have corporate profit margins soaring. So sales are going down, but profit margins are going up because they're changing how they price, which you'll love, and the mix of things. And so it's this kind of interesting backdrop. It would be easy to sit back and say, "Oh, things are terrible. I can't do, fill in the blank with whatever you were thinking about."
Right. My take on that is like, we're not Nike. We're not playing a numbers game and not trying to attract or reach the mass market. So I feel like people like us can be super nimble and find really lucrative pockets that are perhaps in spite of whatever's going on in the macro.
Yes, niche and play your game, right?
We're always beating the drum for specialization and niching down. And this is just one of those examples where, like, if you're just generally selling, average stuff to average people, if you're just selling white T-shirts, good luck.
Yeah.
And if you have to sell, razor thin margins and you have to make your income based on volume, like, thank goodness we are not in those kinds of building those kinds of businesses. So I couldn't agree more. It's like you know me, I don't read the headlines at all, so I barely know what's going on. But I do know that, like in my Slack room, a lot of people do get caught up in it. And like you said, real things are really happening and impacting people's lives in a very negative way. I'm not completely, have my head in the sand, but I just don't look at it constantly. I don't look at it even every day. Big news I hear, and probably on the weekends, I'll catch up on the headlines from the week or whatever. I'm just not constantly depressing myself with things I have no control over.
If it bleeds, it leads. So that's what we bombard ourselves with. And, I'm not suggesting that we, curl into a ball and not listen to anything, but you do kind of have to decide what you let into your consciousness.
Exactly. It's exactly how I look at it.
Yeah. Well, there was an article last night. Today's the 12th as we're recording, and it was by Paul Krugman, who wrote an opinion piece for the New York Times. And the title was "Watch What People Do, Not What They Say." And his point in it, and the example he used that I loved, is New York City. And he said, everybody's saying, "Oh, the city's dead in terms of action, that it's not safe." He said, and yeah, in the daytime it's quiet because the offices are empty. But he said at nighttime, like, try getting a reservation at a hot restaurant in New York, or going to a bar, or do they still have discos? I don't know.
Disco.
I was thinking like a dance party, like dance club. A club, thank you. All right, I'm not old enough to have gone to Studio 54, just for the record.
No, we know. You get the satin jumpsuit still.
Yeah, right. It's in there somewhere. But like when you think about that, it's a really interesting way to look at at clients. Like it's easy to go, oh, well, the headlines say everybody's down, but then you have a client where it's just the opposite. They're trying, to do a thing that you happen to specialize in, and they need your help now. And they're not really worried about the budget. They're worried about the outcome.
Right. So folks like us probably don't need 20 clients. 20 would probably be a lot. Back when I was consulting. So for anybody who's consulting, a solo consultant, 10 would probably be as much as you could handle in the year. And if your niche has 10,000, probably in a normal distribution, there are ones that are having a year that looks like the headlines, but at both ends, there's going to be people who are not in that same situation. You just don't need 10,000 customers. You probably just need a handful of good clients who are, in spite of whatever's going on in the macro environment, are having a great year. Think of the headlines from the last few years with COVID, and it was just pure doom and gloom. I had a bunch of students who had their best years ever. Mm-hmm. It's just unevenly distributed. So I guess we're just hammering on the drum of like, don't let the headlines bum you out too much, because almost certainly there are exceptions to the rule for whom you could provide a lot of value, create positive impact, and they would pay handsomely for it.
Yeah, it's kind of like finding that little pocket. And when I say little, it can actually have a lot of revenue in there. I mean, I've got a couple of clients that are they serve a somewhat similar industry. And for one, 2024 is probably going to be their most amazing year financially yet. And for the other one, not so sure. Right. 2023 was a really tough year. So, sometimes, and I'm not suggesting that you have to pivot the way a lot of us did in 2020, but it might be that you just renew your focus in a particular portion of your niche too.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like we talked about this recently, but I might have been talking to somewhere else because I'm always talking. But shaking up your product mix for the existing niche can also be an interesting thing to do.
Yes.
And is perhaps a segue into what I'm thinking about for my focus for this year. But before we get there, like I've talked to people who are like, look, people are just gasping at my price points for my normal stuff. And it's like, well, make something new that is lower cost to them, lower cost to you, that you can price profitably for both parties, and shake it up. Try something different. Do a little experiment.
Well, that's the Pia Silva story, right? Because the story she tells is that they had a bunch of $30,000 design projects that were going nowhere. Mm-hmm. And they had a light bulb moment, and they switched it to either $2,000 or $5,000 projects, called all the $30,000 people, said, hey, that's off the table. But hey, if you want, I have this other one. She closed every single one. Mm. Right. And obviously, if you think something's going to be 30,000 and all of a sudden it's 2 or 5, it feels like bargain basement time. I'll take one. Right. But sometimes I think we just have to like flip a switch and really look at it differently and throw out our old assumptions about what works and try something new. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So speaking of trying something new, what
are you going to try?
2024. Yeah. So to be transparent about it, we're actually recording this before Christmas. So I think both of us are still in advance of that kind of quiet period when these thoughts kind of solidify, at least for me.
Yes. Yeah, me too. I like having that extra week between Christmas and New Year's where, the only tugs on me are personal.
Right. And that's when it just sort of naturally happened. It has always kind of naturally happened for me at that time of the year. It's just, New Year's and renewal and all of that stuff. And like the post-holiday kind of, I was going to say hangover, but glow, like just like, okay.
Yeah, glow sounds better than hangover.
Right. But I've been really conscious about it this year because some of the episodes we recorded leading up to this and being almost like hovering above myself, kind of observing my process for like, what are the things that end up feeding into that probably late night session where I'm just like brain dumping into a text document. And I have been noticing it's kind of like looking back and saying like, okay, what was the plan for this year? What worked? What didn't work? Did it work? How did it work overall? How happy am I with it across a variety of factors? How many days were super fun and energized? How many weren't? How was revenue, of course? How's the subscribership looking on the mailing list? Those are my basic metrics. Maybe a half a dozen things. With this new information that I didn't have at the beginning of last year, or this year, it's confusing, the beginning of 2023, then what would be more fun? Like, what would be fun to try? What do I think would energize me? And they're a series of things, little things that have little irons in the fire that I always have going on. And looking at those and being like, which ones of those would be the fun one to take out and hammer into a horseshoe? Like, which ones of these would be fun, given all of the information from 2023 and like how things went, plus what would be fun to work on that I think would improve whatever situation in 2023 was. And and I'm starting to feel it coalesce. I'm starting to feel it coalesce around some things to do and like what the umbrella focus might be for the year.
We talked about that offline last week. I'm excited to see this.
Yeah. And it was the point of even describing that is that it's not like I just woke up and I know that, it's not like magic. It's just, I'm just sensitive to just everything that's going on, and my compass of like, what would be fun? What would I be excited to get out of bed to work on that perhaps could contribute to continued impact and success in 2024. And looking back, do you want me to, I guess I could dive in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So for me, looking back over 2022 for me was a lot of automation, where I wanted to be able to do a lot of course launches, like one every month pretty much. And that was just way too complicated to do manually or without hiring someone. So I finally settled on a process to automate the sort of marketing and delivery of a workshop every month. So that was really fun, actually, because I got to build a bunch of stuff, even though it's not really technically client facing, because that it's automated is not obvious. It could be not automated. It's not like a robot's doing it. So it was really fun because I get to code, which I love doing. I don't code for money anymore, but I still like doing it for myself. Mm-hmm. And so that was super fun. And then at the end of that year, I was like, okay, I've got these systems set up. They're working. I could literally 10x the number of people who go through any of these workshops. So for 2023, my plan was to increase awareness. So it was like top of funnel stuff, so that more people would be aware, more people who mostly bill by the hour would become aware of the hourly billing is nuts stuff, and then get on my list. That was my big thing. It's like, do stuff top of funnel to get people on my list. Not even buy anything, just get them on the list, and eventually that will trickle down into enough people buying stuff that I can continue to keep doing that. And in retrospect, I did not enjoy that at all. It was not fun. It wasn't bad. It wasn't torturous, with some exceptions, like dorking around with Instagram and a little bit with LinkedIn. I don't enjoy that, but I got LinkedIn in particular down to a very quick weekly batch process that is it's not fun, but it doesn't take me enough time to even worry about it. It's like 5 minutes. But the whole thing, some of the tactics were like go on more podcasts, put more stuff on YouTube, put more stuff on social, do more sort of virtual speaking engagements online or remotely. And I guess with the exception of those are fun, but there were hardly any of those. I maybe did 3 of those last year, maybe 4. Doing the podcast tour thing is tedious. Getting booked on people's shows is tedious.
Yeah, doing them is fun. Getting them is tedious.
Right. I love doing them, but getting them is just it's tough to automate and do well. It's easy to imagine outsourcing it, but I've got some people that do that, and that's not great either. And just all of that stuff is like, it just wasn't fun. It's just not fun, not a fun way to spend time. And as a consequence, I couldn't automate it, and I don't really enjoy doing it. So I did a poor job of keeping up with it.
There's a lesson in that for us all.
Yeah, sure. It's like, I just know if I'm not enjoying it, I'm not going to do it. It's, like I'm always talking about, like, does this to-do that I'm procrastinating on, does it really need to get done, or can I just delete it? So, there's stuff like that. And since it was mostly about top of funnel stuff and increasing awareness and promoting and all of that, I didn't make anything. And that actually, from our conversation last week, I realized that I was like, oh, I get a lot of energy. I love making things. It's super fun. Right. And I don't think I made one thing. I can't think of one thing I made in 2023. I didn't build any automation. I was just like running manual systems. Yeah, I don't think I made anything. Just, I wrote every day, but I didn't make like a course. I don't think I did.
Build. Maybe that's
build. Yeah.
Build something.
I didn't build anything. And other than a bathroom.
Yeah. I think it all went into that one room.
It really did. And as we discussed, I was in my somewhere between incompetency zone and competency zone for that whole project, which was not energizing.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't build anything in my genius zone at all in 2023. I cannot think of anything. Maybe I did. Maybe there was something at the beginning of the year or something, but it was really like, okay, I'm going to let the system do its thing and just get more people aware of the message, the mission, and get them into the system. I got a ton of new people in Ditcherville. So, I mean, like, things, it worked, but it wasn't fun.
It's like an operational or executional year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes we need some of those, but it doesn't mean it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it wasn't not fun. It was just like, I just wasn't feeling energized. I felt very not energized by the fall. So one new thing I did during the end of the year was that 360 engagement I think I've talked about on the show, where I went deep into one particular student's business, like behind the scenes financials and everything. And that was really fun. And I was like, okay, that was really fun. And there was particular pieces of it that I'm like, ooh, this would make a cool workshop that I think would be fun. It could turn into a book. It could turn into a lot of different things. It's just like a new planet in my solar system. And it's like, oh, that could be cool. So as of right now, and I haven't had my sort of contemplative post-holiday brain dump, but it's feeling like I definitely want to be building. It feels like building things is going to be the core. Some version of that is going to be the core focus. And perhaps, I've certainly found this in the past, sometimes launching new things actually increases awareness because people talk about new stuff.
Yeah, Jeff Walker talks about that in his book, in his launch book. It's well, he calls it a hot list, but I like to think of it as just new gets attention. It almost doesn't matter if it's something they like or not, but it draws new people, new energy to you. Yeah, grows email lists.
Right. So building stuff, perhaps, this is just the hypothesis, perhaps it will increase awareness in a way that would be way more fun and, than cold emailing people to come on their podcast. Yeah, so maybe two birds with one stone, because then I know that'll be a lot more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that feels exciting. I can, and again, just to expose the process to the listener, I'm just picturing it and sort of sensing my reaction, and it sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not some hobby thing. It's not like I just like, I'm trying to draw a distinction between just engaging in activities that I find pleasing versus, that's a superset of all the things I could spend my time doing, all the things that I just find pleasing. And then there's a subset of that is specifically around my business that theoretically or hypothetically could further my agenda. Right. So I'm not saying like listen to your gut and just do whatever you think is fun or you're passionate about. I'm like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying like what makes sense strategically based on my overall objective to rid the world of hourly billing. What makes sense for this year to focus on? And that narrows down, that whittles down to, there's probably only, I don't know, fewer than 10 things that I would even think of to consider. Probably not even 10. And then say like, okay, of these, which one seems the most fun? So it's not just a whole like, oh, maybe this year I'll just practice my tornado kick all year. Like that's not, that would be fun too. I had a visual
for that.
That would be energizing, but it's not going to further my objective.
Yeah. And I think, as I'm listening to you and, I've experienced this with you through the course of the last few years, it's like, I think there's a lesson for the listener, really for all of us in this, because we have years where what we're doing is sort of digesting the things that we did from the year before. Like you might have a high growth year that took you away from a plateau, and that plateau could be a revenue plateau, or it could be the kind of work that you're doing. Like you felt stuck like in this plateau. Yep. And so then you go up a notch, and it's not surprising that there's that sort of year. Like, okay, I have all these programs. I need to systematize them. I need to have this, make sense. I mean, you started out as a coder. Like, of course, that's your job, right? Or was your job is like to make order out of chaos and make things work. So it's like, that's probably like your set point, right? You always want to come back to that. Yeah. And I think a lot of us, even if we're not wired that way, most of us don't want to run our business like our hair is on fire, right? And we'll put up with it for a while. Maybe we'll even really love it for a little while. But long term, we're looking, because we're doing these businesses not only for the money, but for the impact and the free time and the flexibility. And we don't have that if we're 90 miles an hour with our hair on fire. So it's that's what it feels like. Is there's always this time where we just sort of integrate everything that we've done, and then we get ready to do the next leap.
Yeah. So where are you at in this process?
Well, I still need that week to really sit back, but I think my theme is feeling like it's expansion. As you notice, like the last few episodes, I keep saying the upward spiral. Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at. I mean, for me, I spent 2022 testing and developing and rolling out my first mastermind. And that was for soloist women. And that was really cool. Love doing that, creating something new. I love that it was a group thing, whereas most of my things, I'd done some group things, but really most of my revenue came from one-to-one. And then in 2023, I decided what I really wanted to do is I wanted to kind of double down on the soloist women thing, but I wasn't sure at the beginning of the year what that looked like. And by the middle of the year, I realized, oh, it's a podcast.
Right.
And so that was the creating something new or building something new. And so that was super fun. And it hit against some of my own limits. Right? It was like, oh, do I want to put my voice out there in this way? Do I want to like deal with all the stuff that comes with focusing on one gender? Like, do I want to go there? So I went through all of that. So I did, it was fun, but it was also, it really pushed me to expand. And I like that. And I was originally thinking that this might be the year of connection, but I think that was my theme for last year. And I certainly did it. And I thought, this is about expansion, and expansion in terms of, it's not just revenue. I mean, that's certainly part of it, but it's expansion in terms of the impact that I can make out in the world. It's expansion in terms of the people that I know and that I meet in the course of this work, and how I can kind of collaborate with them to get the places where our messages intersect out into the world, and really get people to realize that being a soloist is a worthy profession, and that you don't have to listen to all of the noise out there about how many employees you have to hire and how you have to grow at all costs. And so, yeah, it's really, I was thinking about this when you were talking too. It's really about how do we further our revolution? And the way I've described it for the other podcast is, and it could apply to this one too, for that matter, it's turn your expertise into wealth and impact. But where wealth is revenue, free time, and flexibility, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just money, and it's how you balance. It's the balance of those three that each of us in our own way define as wealth. And all of our definitions are different. But I just love this idea that wealth is about more than money, and that it's okay to use the word, that it doesn't mean that we are some like slimy, like bootlicking, terrible capitalist. It's okay to want to build wealth for yourself, for your family, for the people that you want to help in the world. So it's really those. And I think the other thing is that I like this upward spiral. And I think if we follow Gay Hendricks' teachings on this, he's the one that gave me the term, it's become so easy to put limits on our success. And we do it sometimes without thinking. We sabotage. Like we have a great day at the office, then we go home and we pick a fight with our spouse or partner, right? We do that. And I think this is the year I want to be really, really conscious of anything that gets in the way of the upward spiral. Like what could I do that would just keep this going up? Right. And I like to think of it as it's not just me, although obviously, I'm the one playing with this and thinking about it and how do I make a living at this? But it's really about how that idea of building wealth and impact from your expertise, how does that get out there? How can I have more people who are receptive to it, hear the message, and make the change that they want to make?
Yeah. More impact and all the things that come with it. How do you detect, like if that started to solidify, right? Like how would you detect what things you would do to contribute to that? Is it the same with me where you're just like, you can just tell what would be fun, or is there some other metric?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. I do think I can tell what would be fun, but I can't always tell what's going to spark where, right? And so, the example I use is that Jenny Blake is guesting on the episode that it will have dropped by the time this episode airs, but it drops on the 14th of December. And I had so much fun with that. I loved her book. I must have bought 10 books that she recommended in her book. I think I bought a couple of pieces of software. It turns out that someone in my circle is actually a friend of hers, and she was mentioned in the book. I reached out to her. The next thing I know, she's on the show. Generous interview. She's doing some really interesting different things. I mean, that's an example where that felt expansive. Does it go anywhere else? It doesn't have to. I mean, maybe it will. I don't know. But it feels expansive. It feels like that was a good thing. Now, I could have that same feeling with someone who doesn't have a big audience, who doesn't have a couple of top ranked podcasts, where they share a story that I can feel resonating. Like my sign is that when I get goosebumps, when somebody tells me either like a direction they want to go or something that happened to them like that, that's usually when I think, okay, if I'm getting goosebumps, other people are going to resonate with this too. And that all feels, expansive, right? And, I was thinking when you said, you looked at your list and you have this thing that you're procrastinating about. I had one of those yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
That it's been on my list. I was on their calendar and they kept changing the call that was going to be recorded. And I think it got changed like 6 times. And I finally just said, I just really don't want to do this now. And so, but I still had it on my list because I was like, I owe it to this soloist women concept to go on this platform and talk about it. I should make myself do this. And so I still had it on the list. I was looking at it yesterday, and so I clicked on the thing and I said, all right, I either have to, do this or take it off the list. And I looked at the site and I went, I don't want to do this. And so I took it off my list, and I had the email. I finally got to inbox 0. I'm there. I'm going to stay there. And I looked at the email, I'm like, all right, where do I file this? And I went, I don't file it. I don't want to do this. I hit delete. And I guess that's the point. So in that case, it would have been expansive, theoretically, right? This is someone with a really big audience, but I just wasn't feeling it. And it wasn't about my ego and the 6 times. I mean, I won't say that helped, but it was like, I just felt like our messages weren't aligned. There wasn't enough overlap in the messaging, even though it was a big female audience. It wasn't the right audience. And I just, and it felt so good. It was like the last thing I did before I shut down last night. And I'm like, oh, I have to do this more often on the things that just sit there on my list. So yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it really is about how you want to spend your time. So like, I don't know if this is, I feel like this might seem off topic, but to me it's on topic, which is, you were just mentioning wealth and like, it's not just money. And I've a couple of, like, retrospectively over the course of this year, there are definitely times where I was just like, like not jumping out of bed to do podcast outreach or something like that. And I found myself, even in interviews, I had this one interview on Everyone Hates Marketers where Louis Grenier asked me something like, he was really, really digging into like my revenue and divided by hours that I work. He was like really curious about that, which is his style. So I went there, but I there's this offhanded comment that I made. I don't remember making really. I just sort of heard it in the replay where I was like, I said, I feel like I'm retired and that's not good. And I was like, I'm like, what? There was something in that.
Yeah. There's a judgment right there.
There's something going on. Yeah. And I'm like, well, what do I even think retired means? Cause I was labeling, I think I was using the word retired in a defeatist kind of way. Like, you're in the locker room after the game and that's it. Cause that's how it felt when I said it. That's how it sounded when I said it. And I was like, but what did I mean? And it had, so I feel like I achieved lots of free time last year and the year before, but the wealth comes from free time's not sufficient for me because the things that I fill up my time with are not in my genius zone. So I end up with a whole bunch of time spent doing barely competent stuff. And I never picture retirement anywhere near anyone's genius zone, which may be not true, but that's the way I picture it. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, the typical, not quite margaritas on the beach, but, all of my parents and in-laws, they're all been retired for a long time and they all seem happy or whatever, but I wouldn't want the lifestyles that they have. Mm-hmm. And like my dad and Erica's dad, classic young boomer, 35-year career at the same Fortune 500, the typical climb the corporate ladder thing and like pop out the top with a golden parachute or whatever. And I'm like, so this year felt like, there were times this year that felt like this hazy definition of retirement that was unappealing. So I knew something was off. And then like, what is it? And then, actually, I think it was after we stopped recording last week when I realized that it was the wealth and the energy and like what we want the free time for isn't to just have free time. It sounds so obvious now that I'm saying it out loud, but it was not obvious to my gut instinct where I was like, oh, I don't want to spend my days with nothing to do so I can just float around and do whatever I want. I would rather spend more time doing stuff that the only word is energize me, like the stuff I want to jump out of bed to do. So like whether or not that looks like or is categorized as work becomes immaterial, but I wasn't looking at it like that before. Well,
here's the non-shrink listening to this and saying it was the impact perhaps, right? Because, when you did the bathroom as an example, it had a huge impact on a very small group of people. But it was big. But, when you're doing your day job, if you will, you're looking at impacting a much larger group of people. And there's something about the impact that can relate to the energizing for some people.
Sure.
Not everybody's driven by that. And, I live in a town where we have a lot of retirees, and there are retirees who, like, there's one who's, in her late 70s and traveling to meet a business client and, working as well as, going to the pool every day at 3:00. I mean, she balances both of those. And then there's some, because Palm Springs is kind of a happy party town, who, it's all about, having drinks at the pool every day. And so, yeah, there, just like there's a gazillion definitions of retirement, I think there's a gazillion definitions of how you want to make an impact. And it's like we could have a great financial year, and if we're driven by impact, if impact energizes us and we're not feeling like we're doing that, wouldn't be surprising that it would kind of feel like low energy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in case it wasn't clear, I just keep hammering on this same point. It's like the freedom to do energizing things. It completely boils down to how you feel, right? It's like, and that's not intangible. It's the most tangible thing.
It's your source of energy to do all the things you have to do in your life. If you're not energizing yourself, if you're not feeding the machine, putting the logs in.
Yeah, the battery's low. It just feels low. And so like thinking about, so to get back to planning for the year, so this is where I'm trying to land the plane, is like, for people listening, it's like, what would charge you up? What activities could you do during the day that would further your mission and potentially reach your objective? Not that you won't tweak it and course correct along the way. But a great starting point for me is to know what kinds of things would charge me up during the day, and then look for an overlap in the Venn diagram of like stuff that's going to increase my wealth and impact, and that I don't have to force myself to do every day.
Genius zone.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you think of it, if you just think of it on like, I'm trying to bring it down to a really micro level where it's like, what would it, like, if you get out of bed tomorrow, or like planning for your day, like what would make you jump out of bed? Just like, can't wait to like not hit the snooze, skip the shower, go straight to the computer or whatever. Like what's that list of things? And then is there some way, what is the path from where you are to spending your days like that in the future? It's not this, it's to me, it's like almost the opposite of being like, I want to make $1 million next year, or I want to have this much money in the bank. Like this just goal thing. Mm-hmm. That does not work for me in the moment.
Well, I think there's research around, goals that are tied to your emotions, and what you really want to achieve big picture are the ones that are most likely to be accomplished.
Sure.
Right?
If you set up systems around that, I think I agree with that. I do agree with that.
Yeah. I'm big picture. I mean, those are the things, because those are the things we want to do, like, crossing off the going on a show I really didn't want to go on. It's finding those things. And that's what does lead us to our genius zones. And it's not like we sit up on the mountaintop and go, oh, this is my genius. I mean, if you've been doing something long enough, you may be able to jot it down pretty quickly, but you might not know yet. You might be in a stage where you feel like you're getting up every morning, you got your to-do list, and you're like,
Yeah.
And so something needs to change. So one way to look at that is just start looking at the to-do list. Change at the bottom, at the simplest place that you can start, which is what's on your to-do list. And I will tell you right now, I got so much energy from just taking that one thing off that damn list.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're like, oh, that was really on my back.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the middle of reading the Getting Things Done, I think it's the 2015 update, but I wanted to see like how his system jived with mine. And and so I put some of those things on a separate list. And when I did that, it really called attention to the things that, didn't spike my excitement meter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we talked last time about like Marie Kondo, your schedule, or maybe that was my...
Yeah. Did we invent that? Yeah, I think we talked about that.
Yeah. So I don't think it's woo to say like, to be able to just like follow your feelings. I mean, it's a combination of things, but I
Did you
guess
just say that?
I know.
Did
I
you
know.
just say that?
It's true,
Okay,
though.
Jonathan Stark, I'm noting this down. December 12th, 2023.
Right. For folks who, for folks who just have no clue, because I talked to tons of them. Like, I could do a million things. I can't pick one. I don't know who I want to help. Like, but there are a lot of different ways into this, whatever you measure success by. There are a lot of ways into it. It's like, okay, so a possible foot in the door into a direction for the year or otherwise is just being super micro and just paying attention to how you feel about your activities, your day, like each thing that you have, scheduled in the afternoon. And am I looking forward to this or not? It really boils down to that. It's like, am I looking forward to this meeting or this to-do or this project or not? Am I excited or not? And I guess it's just same old Genius Zone concept, but if you don't know where to start...
I'm laughing because it's exactly why I'm working on a Genius Zone time challenge, because we don't do this if we don't do it. It's like we have to pay attention to it before we'll actually make a change. It's like it has to hit into the conscious level of what we're doing that is definitely outside the Genius Zone.
Yeah, I just heard this quote the other day. I'm not sure who said it. Was old self-helpy kind of quote where the interviewee said something like, you got to get your thoughts right. You got to know what you're thinking, get control over your thoughts. And the guy said, yeah, because thoughts control your actions. And then the interviewee said, well, thoughts control your feelings and your feelings control your actions. And I was like, ooh, first of all, I agree with that. And second of all, that's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
And I think we talked last time about how as you get older and the number of responsibilities that you take on increases, it can become harder and harder to even remember or notice how any of it's making you feel, because you're doing a lot of it or all of it for outside reasons, for other people. And these are just responsibilities that you've, I don't want to say encumbered yourself with, but you're doing them for an abstraction. The reason that you're doing them is an abstraction or like one step removed. So if you're really bad at sensing, even knowing when you're in your Genius Zone is kind of what I'm saying. It's like if you have no clue where that is or what it is, I would just like start look at your calendar, look at your to-do list. What are you excited about doing? Hopefully the answer isn't nothing, but there's something. Or even if the answer is nothing, just look back the past year or two. Like, what did you completely get deep work done, or get deep focus, or lose time, or just really, really had fun doing? And just looking for clues. I'm just trying to find a bottom up way for someone listening who's just not knowing what to do. I always want to give people some kind of like tactical advice.
Well, I think what happens is we say yes because in the moment, like yes sounds really good. But then a week later, a day later, a month later, when you have to actually deliver on the thing you said yes to, all of a sudden we're like, why did I say yes to that?
Yeah.
So I think what can happen is that our to-do lists get cluttered with things for other people, or as you said, for other agendas that like we just don't really care about. And so I think that there's a lot of us, women in particular, are socialized to say, okay, of course I'll do that because nobody else. I mean, that's what I did in my HOA is like nobody else stepped up, so I did. Right. It was like somebody had to. I guess it's going to be me. Right. So we do that. And then we look with dismay at our to-do list and go, how did this happen? Right. How did I agree to make cookies for this or deliver, hot meals over here and the equivalent in your professional life. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that clarity and so you look for where the emotions are, look for where you really love something and look for the opposite. Look at something that you're dreading.
Dread.
And, I guarantee in most cases, not all, but in most cases, the thing that you dread might be in somebody else's Genius Zone. Mm-hmm. It might be, they might love to take it off your hands, if in fact it even needs to be done. It might be like my thing where you could just cross it off and, nobody dies.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. Is this helpful for folks kicking off the 2024? This is more art than science. I don't think either one of us have it'd be hard to make a SOP for this, like a checklist or repeatable process. It's just it's an exploration retrospectively and sort of like projecting into the future around how you're going to feel going throughout your day, every day for the rest of the year. That's just it. And if you can get closer and closer every day or every week or every month or every year to improving the way you feel every day, like then like that's where it's at. It's not like success has to be delayed and someday you'll be rich and retired, like I was talking about before. Oh, now I can finally be happy. It's like, no, you're not going to be happy unless you learn how to be happy.
Be happy now.
Way. Be happy now, right? And of course, you can't just change your to-do list or your calendar overnight. It takes time. So if you're not jazzed about what's on your calendar right now, it's going to probably take time. There's probably some things you could just cancel. I'm not doing these weekly check-ins anymore, or I'm going to switch them to bi-weekly, or these daily stand-ups are just a waste of time. Let's switch to weekly, and just get some of those things that drain you off your plate, especially anything recurring, and then slowly start putting stuff in there that contributes to your success or your goals, but that you're looking forward to and energizes you.
Well, and then just to circle back to the point we made at the very beginning, when we were talking about headlines and, all the messages that are bombarding you from all sorts of different sources is, niche well and play your game, right? It's not about what somebody else did to be successful. It's about what you want to do to make your impact with your people using your expertise.
Yep. Follow the goosebumps into these pockets of value creation, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. That's enough woo out of me.
Put a pin in that woo.
I sense our first coffee cup, our merch. Follow your feelings. It's like a scripty font.
I think it should be follow your woo.
Follow the woo. Oh, God. All the woos down in Wooville. All right. We're losing it. So this is the end of the year for us. So you can see.
Can you tell? Yeah. So we have a couple weeks off, and then we have our first episode, which will air on New Year's Day. And what better way to start the new year than listening to us?
Yes. Well, Happy New Year, dear listener.
Absolutely.
See you in 2024. All right. That's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark.
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
And we hope you join us again next time for The Business of Authority. Bye.
Bye-bye.